There are 10 scenarios where the actions taken by the Chinese nationals in the United States may lead to persecution if they were returned to China. The first one is political dissident. So if a Chinese citizen engages in activities in the United States that can be seen as opposing the Chinese government, such as participating in protests against the Communist Party of China, or writing critical essays or books, or forming relationships with anti-communist groups, they may face severe repercussions upon their return. So China has stringent laws against what it perceives as subversive or separatist activities. Chinese government often persecutes such cases under the charges of endangering state security or spreading rumors. And the second one is developing anti-censorship software. Engineers and some developers who create software that designed to bypass the internet censorship in China, such as VPN services or other tools that enable unrestricted internet access, risk being accused of subverting state control over the internet. Such activities are illegal under Chinese law, and returned nationals could face serious charges. And the third one is religious activities. Practicing or promoting any religious beliefs that are not sanctioned by Chinese government, such as Christianity, in non-state-sanctioned churches or other faiths like Falun Gong, which is banned in China, could lead to persecution. The Chinese government strictly controls the religious practices and often cracks down on those it deemed unauthorized, with penalties ranges from fines to imprisonment. And the fourth one is support for human rights. Actively supporting any human rights initiatives, particularly those that criticize the Chinese government's human rights records, can be risky. Involvement in human rights organizations and speaking at the relevant public forum or working with the international human rights bodies may attract the attention of Chinese authority, who may interpret such action as a threat to national security. The fifth one is journalism and whistleblowing. While in the United States, reporting on sensitive issues like corruption within the Chinese government or Chinese companies, or environmental disasters in China, or poor working conditions in Chinese factory can lead to accusations of smearing the state or espionage, especially for those reports are published on the Western media. And the sixth one is LGBTQ plus advocacy. Well, LGBTQ plus rights have gained some recognition in China, but for activism, especially if it linked to international movement or criticism of Chinese policy, could be seen as problematic. So for some prominent activists, they have faced harassment or even detention. And for those promoting LGBTQ plus rights from a Western standpoint, might have particularly sensitive. And the seventh one is legal advocacy. If you are engaging in some legal advocacy or just providing for some legal assistance on cases which are related to human rights or territorial disputes or other sensitive topics against the Chinese government interest in the United States, might lead to judicial harassment or even worse if you are come back to China. The legal profession is tightly regulated, and actions seen as contradictory to the national interest are not tolerated. And the eighth one is participation in overseas pro-democracy organizations. Being active in such organizations that promote democracy, particularly for those that are critical of authoritarian regime, including China's, could lead to serious legal consequences upon returning to China. The Chinese government often view such involvement as a threat to its one-party rule and may leave charges related to subversion or undermining state power. And the ninth one is social media activism, using some social media platforms to criticize the Chinese government or to mobilize support for causes deemed sensitive by CCP can lead to persecution. So China has extensive regulations and monitoring mechanisms to control the flow of information and to maintain social stability. So for some state actions, like on platforms even abroad in China, like Twitter or Facebook, can be traced and used to against individuals upon their return. And the 10th one is advocating for minority rights in China. so advocating for the rights of ethnic minorities in China, such as Mongolians, Tibetan, and Uyghurs, especially if such advocacy involves criticizing the Chinese policies and highlighting the human rights abuses, is particularly sensitive, right? So activists can be accused of inciting ethnic hatred or endangering national unity. If you are participating in Tibetan or Uyghur movements, such as expressing support for the Tibetan independence movement or the rights of Uyghurs in Xinjiang, including participation in rallies, could result in charges of separatism or terrorism upon your return to China. So CCP maintains a strict policy against what it considers separatist movement within its borders. And 11 is development of apps or technology deemed sensitive by China. So some developers who create apps or software that enable circumventions of Chinese censorship, provide platforms for free speech, or facilitate protest or demonstration might be at risk. For some technological contributes, or even if aimed at promoting freedom and democracy, are likely to be seen as threats to national security. Or participating in independent media platforms that offers uncensored news or commentary about China that can be risk endeavor. Such platforms will be blocked in China, and the creators could face accusation of undermining social stability and spreading anti-CCP sentiments. And the 12th one is historical research which contradicting to the state narratives. For some scholars who engaged in historical research that challenged the CCP's official narratives, such that sensitive topics like the Great Famine or Cultural Revolution or the Great Leap Forward or the 1989 Tiananmen Square protest might face persecution for undermining the state propaganda. So some historians or some authors dealing with such materials might be accused of spreading falsehoods or attempting to destabilize the social harmony or defaming the state. And the 13th one is participating in international advocacy for Hong Kong, for active involvement in movement or advocacy group that's supporting democracy in Hong Kong can lead to accusation of inciting secession or subversion of state power. Since the implementation of the national security law in Hong Kong, the Chinese government has been particularly sensitive to any external support for Hong Kong's pro-democracy movement. And 14 is supporting Taiwan independence. While you are in the United States, public expressing support for Taiwan independence, while through participating in demonstrations, speaking at events, or just publishing writing on the matter could attract significant legal and personal risk upon returning to China. So China considers Taiwan as just a part of its sovereign territory and strongly opposes any form of sensationalist activities. And the 15th one is participation in exile government activities. Any involvement with the governments in exile that opposes to China, such as the Tibetan government in exile, could result in severe penalties, which include accusations of treason or endangering state security. So China views this kind of support for these entities as direct challenges to its sovereignty. Number 16 is engagement with overseas Chinese dissident community. So actively participation in this community or a group of Chinese dissidents living abroad, especially for those known for criticizing the Chinese government, could lead to surveillance, harassment, or detention when it returns to China. So CCP is particularly sensitive to this influence or dissident networks. And the 17th is the promotion of alternative political systems, like lecturing, writing, or public debating about the alternative political system, such as the multi-party democracy, which are in direct opposition to China's one-party system, can be very dangerous. Advocacy for political reform, particularly from abroad, is often met with hostility and the risk of being targeted of a traitor or foreign agent. And the 18th is dissemination of banned literature or media for those distributing or promoting access to books, films, or articles that are banned in China, especially for those that criticize about the CCP or discuss prohibited history events, can result in accusation of spreading harmful information or undermining societal harmony.